My name is Natalie Kerr, and I'm 28 years old. Right now, I should be lying on a beach in Hawaii, sunscreen in my hair, sand on my legs, listening to my husband tease me about how I always overpack. Instead, I'm replaying video footage of that same husband kissing my maid of honor in a restroom in his tux on our wedding day. I married Mark yesterday. He's 27, tall, easy smile, the kind of guy who can talk a stranger into laughing within 10 seconds. For almost 4 years, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Stable job, gentle, charming, affectionate. He loves bad puns and strong coffee. When he proposed, I cried so hard he started crying too. We planned a big 2-day wedding. Day 1, bachelor and bachelorette parties. Day 2, ceremony and family lunch before we were supposed to head to the airport and start our honeymoon in Hawaii. We agreed on one rule for those 2 days. Same venue for both parties. Groomsmen and bridesmaids free to float between, but he and I wouldn't see each other at all until I walked down the aisle. I thought it was romantic. The suspense, the anticipation. Now it feels like the setup to a cruel joke. The night before the wedding, my bridesmaids practically vibrated with excitement. My maid of honor, Chloe, was the loudest of all. She's 27, too, pretty in that effortless way. Big eyes, glossy hair, a laugh you can hear across a room. She's been my best friend since high school. She kept clinking her glass, saying, "Tomorrow, Nat, you're going to be Mrs. Kerr. Can you believe it?" I remember thinking how lucky I was, the man I loved, my oldest friend, all my favorite people in one place. We were all at the same resort. Bachelor party at the rooftop bar, bachelorette party in a private lounge on the same floor. Music thumped through the hallway. Our group sent silly selfies to each other without crossing paths. We drank too much, screamed along to early 2000s pop, and at some point around midnight, I actually passed out with my veil half on. I woke up the next morning with a headache and a feeling like Christmas, birthday, and graduation had all merged into one day. My mother fussed over my hair and makeup. My bridesmaids floated around, fixing bouquets and touching up lipstick. I kept checking my phone, smiling at Mark's last text from the night before. "Next time I see you, you'll be my wife. I love you, Nat. Sleep. I want you conscious at least for the vows." I thought that was funny. I thought everything was fine. The ceremony itself, honestly, it was beautiful. The aisle, the flowers, my dad's hand gripping mine, just a little too tight as he whispered, "If he ever hurts you, I'll kill him," in that half-joking, half-serious dad voice. Mark at the altar, looking stunned and soft when he saw me. My veil, the music, the moment the officiant said we were husband and wife and everyone clapped and whooped. If you freeze the day right there, you'd think we were the perfect couple. You'd never guess what had happened barely hours before. After the ceremony, we had to pick up Mark's grandparents from the airport. Then we all came back for a big lunch. Toasts, clinking glasses, speeches about love and forever. My mom cried. His dad made a joke about grandchildren. I remember looking across the table at Mark and Chloe laughing about something and feeling a sudden, unexplained tug in my chest. They'd always gotten along, but there was this electricity. I pushed away as my own anxiety. I told myself, "You're just tired. You're projecting. Stop." For a while, I could pretend everything was still perfect. At some point during lunch, I excused myself to go to the bathroom. I just wanted a minute alone to breathe, touch up my lipstick, maybe cry happy tears in private. The hallway outside the restrooms was quieter, the music muffled. As I turned the corner, I heard 2 voices, 2 janitors, their carts parked against the wall. They didn't see me at first. "Dude, I'm telling you, it was the bridegroom," one said, low and conspiratorial. "In his tux, kissing that bridesmaid, the one with the sparkly dress." "I thought you said she was the maid of honor," the other replied. "Same thing, she was all over him. In the restroom, man, on the wedding day." I stopped walking. I actually felt my body go cold. My brain heard the words but refused to assemble them into sense. The first janitor snorted. "I mean, you'd think they'd wait until after the vows, right?" The other laughed nervously. "I saw him leaving her room early this morning, too. Thought it was the wrong guy at first. I mean, groom sneaking out of a bridesmaid's room? That's messed up." My wedding dress suddenly felt too tight. The hallway tilted. I must have made a sound because both janitors turned at the same time. Their faces drained of color when they saw me. Full bridal gown, bouquet still in hand, veil pinned perfectly. There was this awful, echoing silence. One of them whispered, Oh, hell. And they practically bolted, pushing their carts down the hallway like they were being chased. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the bathroom door, my ears ringing. It could be a misunderstanding, I told myself. A coincidence. There had to be another explanation. Because the alternative was unthinkable. When I finally remembered how to move, my eyes went straight to the corners of the ceiling, the walls, anywhere there might be a camera. There wasn't one inside the restroom, but in the lobby area just outside the door, there was a small dome camera blinking red. And down the hallway, outside the block of rooms where I'd stayed the night before, another camera watched the corridor. Something ugly and sharp anchored itself in my gut. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called the wedding manager. Hi, this is the bride, Natalie Kerr. My voice sounded weirdly distant, too calm. I need you to meet me in my room, now. And I need the CCTV from the hallway outside the restrooms and outside the bridal suite from last night and this morning. He hesitated. Mrs. Kerr, the recordings are usually... It's about my husband potentially cheating during our wedding, I cut in, my voice cracking on the word husband. Please. There was a beat, then a quiet, I'll be right there. I didn't go back to the lunch. I couldn't. I felt like if I saw Mark's face before I knew the truth, I might actually fall apart in front of everyone. Back in my room, I paced, hands trembling, veil tossed on a chair. My reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger. Perfect makeup, flawless hair, eyes wide and bright with panic. A knock at the door. The wedding manager stood there, tablet in hand, guilt written all over his face like he already knew this wasn't going to end well. I pulled the footage you asked for, he said quietly. I thanked him, asked him to leave the room, and told him to let anyone who asked know that I needed to be alone. He nodded and slipped out, closing the door softly. I locked it. My hands shook so hard I could barely tap the screen. I started with the camera in the lobby outside the men's restroom from that morning. There was Mark, clear as day, in his tux. He walks into the men's room. People go in and out over the next few minutes, and then nothing. The door stays shut. No movement. He peeks out, glances around, and then, from just outside the frame, Chloe appears, my maid of honor, in her champagne-colored dress, hair in soft curls. I watched myself frown at the screen, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. Chloe moves quickly, almost furtively, slipping into the men's room. Mark looks both ways like a cliché movie villain and then disappears in after her, locking the door. The timestamp in the corner of the screen says they're in there for almost 12 minutes. During that time, I can see people come up to the door, try the handle, then wander away. Eventually, a janitor appears, knocks, waits, then throws his hands up and redirects guests upstairs to another restroom. When the door finally opens, Chloe slips out first, smoothing her dress, cheeks flushed. Mark follows a few seconds later, adjusting his bow tie like he just stepped out of a commercial instead of a bathroom he'd defiled our marriage in. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear hit the tablet screen. I forced myself to open the footage from the hallway outside my room the night before. There we were, a series of still-frame ghosts. Me stumbling to my room with my bridesmaids, hugging Chloe, kissing my fingers, and pressing them to the camera, laughing. Then, hours later, Mark and Chloe in that same hallway, tipsy and leaning into each other. They stop. He says something I can't hear. She laughs, touches his chest. He looks around, then pulls her toward my door, the one with the cute bride sign hanging from it. They start making out in the hallway like teenagers. His hands all over her, her fingers in his hair. After a moment, they disappear into the room across from mine, Chloe's room, the night before our wedding, while I was passed out in my own bed, giddy about marrying him. My knees buckled. I fell onto the edge of the bed and sobbed, ugly and loud and desperate, like something was being ripped out of me by force. My phone buzzed and buzzed on the nightstand. Texts, calls, notifications. I turned it face down and shut it off. For a while, there was nothing but the sound of my own breathing, sharp and ragged, and the faint music from the reception 2 floors down. At some point, the knocks on my door started. First soft, then louder. Natalie, honey, my mom. Nat, open up, please, one of my bridesmaids. Even Mark at one point, his voice muffled. Babe, please just tell me what's going on. I couldn't even say his name without feeling sick. I sent the manager a text from my screen-locked notifications. Please tell them I need space. I'll come down when I'm ready. Eventually, the knocking stopped. but the pressure in my chest didn't. When I finally turned my phone back on hours later, it lit up with missed calls and messages. I ignored Mark's texts. I ignored Chloe's. My body moved before my brain did. I wiped my face, pulled off my heels, and walked out of the room. Downstairs, most of the guests had already left. Just our parents, siblings, and a few close friends remained, clustered in awkward little groups. Mark was there, hair slightly messed, tie loosened. Chloe stood a little distance away, eyes red, mascara smudged, like she'd been crying too. As I walked in, every head turned toward me. My mom rushed over, gripping my arms. "What happened, Nat? Are you okay? You disappeared." Behind her, Mark stared at me with a look I'd never seen on his face before. Fear. I looked past all of them, straight at his father. "I'm really enjoying being married right now," I said, my voice flat and shaking. "You raised a fantastic son." The way the room went silent was almost physical. I unlocked my phone, thumb hovering for just a second over the video. Then I stepped closer to Mark's dad and held the screen out. "Watch," I told him. On that tiny screen, in a room full of flowers and half-eaten cake and abandoned champagne flutes, Mark's father watched his son shove his tongue down my maid of honor's throat outside a men's restroom on my wedding day. His face changed in slow motion. Confusion, disbelief, then a raw disgust that made my stomach twist. I didn't wait for anyone to speak. I didn't look at Mark. I didn't look at Chloe. I just turned, gathered my skirt in my hands, walked out of the venue, got into my car, still wearing my wedding dress, and drove. I drove until the city lights disappeared in the rearview mirror, until my phone lost signal, until it was just me, an empty road, and a hollow, unbearable silence where my future used to be. The motel I ended up in wasn't even the kind of place you'd normally choose. It was the kind you settle for when your heart has been ripped open and your wedding dress is still in the back seat of your car, crumpled like a dead thing. A faded sign buzzed over the parking lot. The front desk clerk didn't even blink when I checked in while wearing mascara-streaked cheeks and gym clothes I'd pulled from my trunk. I think he assumed I was coming down from a breakup, not a wedding. Honestly, I looked more like someone who'd run away from home than a bride. The room smelled faintly of bleach and old cigarettes. The bedspread had patterns that made no sense. The bathroom light flickered, but for the first time in 24 hours, I felt invisible. Invisible was safe. I threw myself onto the bed and slept for almost 16 hours. When I woke up, I was starving, shaking from both hunger and emotion. The motel had a tiny convenience store on the ground floor, dusty shelves, questionable sandwiches, instant noodles. I stood there barefoot, hair matted, picking up a bottle of water like I was learning to exist again. I stared at my reflection in the store's security mirror. Swollen eyes, uneven ponytail, the dull look of someone who'd cracked open and leaked out all her hope. I smelled bad. I looked worse. I forced myself upstairs, showered until the water ran cold, then sat on the edge of the tub, breathing in that ugly, chemical motel steam until I could stand without shaking. The next step was the pastor. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to talk to anyone, but I needed clarity, needed a path forward, needed to undo a marriage that had lasted less than a day. I drove to the small chapel where we'd said our vows. The pastor, Father Ellis, looked shocked when he saw me. Maybe it was the sunken eyes, or maybe he could sense the brokenness radiating off me like heat. "Natalie, my dear, what happened?" "Fraud," I whispered. "My marriage was built on fraud." I told him everything, not the details of the video, I couldn't force the words out, but enough. He listened, horrified, hands clasped in front of his mouth. When I finally asked about an annulment, he nodded gently. "An annulment can dissolve a marriage as if it never existed," he said, "but only under specific legal conditions. Coercion, mistaken identity, incapacity, fraud, real fraud, that is, something that compromises consent." "Cheating before the vows is fraud, isn't it?" I insisted. My voice cracked. He pretended to love me while sleeping with someone else. He sighed, grief in his eyes. "Morally, absolutely. Legally, not necessarily. And because you two registered the marriage officially at the magistrate's office, it is now a binding civil contract." I stared at him. The room tilted. "So, I'm stuck with the divorce?" "I'm afraid so." The word divorce felt like someone driving a nail through my chest. He reached for my hand gently. "Natalie, I wish the system were kinder, but you have the right to leave this behind legally. It will just require a different process." I nodded mechanically. The tears came again, hot and humiliating. I left the chapel feeling heavier than when I'd entered. I drove to my parents' house next. By then, they already knew something was terribly wrong. My mother's voice had filled my missed calls list, and my father had left 5 voicemails, each more frantic than the last. When I walked inside, Mom gasped and rushed to hold me, stroking my hair like I was 5 years old again. Dad stood behind her, jaw clenched in fury, not at me, but at what he sensed had been done to me. "Tell us," he said softly, and I broke. I told them everything. The janitors, the hallway footage, the bathroom, Mark, Chloe, the betrayal moments before the vows, the night before. My mother cried silently, holding my hands. My father's face went stone hard. "We're filing for divorce today," he said. "No negotiation." "I don't want to talk to him," I whispered. "You don't have to," he promised. "I'll handle the logistics. You handle healing." Dad isn't just a father. He's a businessman with connections. When I asked if he could help me find a lawyer, he didn't hesitate. He dialed a number instantly. "Daniel," he said into the phone, "I need the best divorce attorney. Today. My daughter's marriage ended before the ink dried, and I want this handled cleanly." He met my eyes while he spoke, and I felt something inside me loosen, a tiny flicker of relief. Dad ended the call and squeezed my shoulder. "He's ready for you." My divorce lawyer, Daniel Rhodes, was confident and sharp, the kind of man who could file paperwork in the middle of a storm. He listened to my account without interrupting, his pen sliding rapidly across his yellow legal pad. When I finished, he tapped his pen thoughtfully. "Good news for you. The marriage wasn't consummated. Legally, that simplifies things significantly." "I don't care about simple," I whispered. "I just want out." "You'll get out," he assured. "We'll file for a fault-based divorce on grounds of adultery." "Do I have to pay him anything?" I asked, terrified. Daniel snorted. "Alimony? Absolutely not. In fact," he flipped to a new page. "We'll pursue recovery of wedding costs. You paid for everything, correct?" "Yes," I murmured. "Then your ex-husband will pay half, minimum." My father nodded grimly, "And I'll cover the remainder to spare her further stress." Daniel continued, "I will file for emergency separation and immediate service of divorce papers. He'll receive them within a week." I swallowed. "Do I have to see him?" "No," Daniel said firmly, "not unless you choose to." That was the first time I breathed deeply in days. Meanwhile, the aftermath unfolded on Mark's side like a slow explosion. His parents left the venue immediately after seeing the footage I showed. My mother told me later that Mark's father looked like he wanted to punch something, or someone. Chloe's parents demanded she leave the lunch. Her maid of honor friend escorted her out of the venue in silence. Mark's family packed up my belongings and dropped them off at my parents' house. And then, shockingly, Mark sent my keys to my mom with an apology message attached. Mom read it aloud. "I'm so sorry. Please help Natalie. I messed up. I know." Dad's jaw clenched so hard I thought it might snap. Even Mark's grandparents refused to speak to him. Every bridge he had was burning. The day after the lawyer meeting, I went back to my now empty house. It looked haunted. The last time I'd been there, we were picking which towels to take on our honeymoon and laughing about how we always forgot sunscreen. Now the silence weighed so heavily it felt oppressive. Mom stayed with me for a few weeks, cooking, cleaning, quietly removing every trace of Mark and Chloe. She washed the sheets even though they hadn't been slept in after the wedding. She repainted the hallway because it felt heavy. She filled the fridge and folded my laundry. She saved me without ever saying the words. Dad stopped by with takeout and asked if I wanted him to burn Mark's suit jacket that had been left behind. I almost said yes. The first real step I took toward healing was joining a fitness club. I needed to channel the panic, the sadness, the anger. My body felt foreign. My mind was foggy. The treadmill became the only place where everything went silent. I lost 5 pounds the first 2 weeks, but more importantly, I felt like I was slowly clawing my way back into myself. Then, one afternoon, my phone vibrated. Mark. I froze. He'd found out about the divorce papers. His text was simple. "Can we talk, please?" Every part of my body rebelled, but a small, wounded part of me needed answers. Needed closure. So I agreed. We met at a public cafe, quiet and tucked away. Seeing him walk in, messy hair, hollow eyes, guilt carved into his face, almost unmade me. But I stayed firm, because I wasn't the broken bride running down the road anymore. I was someone who deserved the truth. Mark sat down across from me like a man walking into his own execution. He wouldn't even look at me at first. His hands were shaking, fingers knotting and unknotting, eyes darting to the table, the floor, anything but my face. He looked smaller somehow, deflated, swallowed by the weight of what he'd done. I didn't say a word. When he finally lifted his eyes to mine, they were bloodshot and exhausted. "Natalie, you look thinner," he whispered, as if noticing too late that grief carves deeper than any diet ever could. I didn't respond. He swallowed hard. "I'm so sorry. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I need to tell you what happened." I let the silence stretch. He took it as permission. He told me everything. How, at his bachelor party, he had too much to drink. How he and Chloe ended up joking around. How one of my bridesmaids stupidly mentioned to Chloe that some brides do a last fling before marriage, thinking it was harmless girl talk. How that planted a seed, one that never should have taken root. Mark said Chloe told him she was curious, that she panicked about never kissing anyone else ever again, that it escalated into them flirting, at first as a joke, then not. "That bachelorette party game," he said miserably, "the one with the silly dares? They dared her to kiss someone she wasn't marrying." I remembered my bridesmaids screaming and laughing and being chaotic. It had seemed innocent at the time. Mark's voice broke. "She picked me." He rubbed his face with both hands. "It was just supposed to be a stupid, drunk moment, Nat, but then it spiraled. We were alone. I don't know if it was adrenaline or alcohol or everything mixing together, but I didn't stop it." "The night before our wedding," I whispered bitterly. He winced. I know. I'm not making excuses. I'm telling you the truth, because I owe you that." His eyes filled with tears. "I never cheated on you before. Never even thought about it. But that night, I became someone I don't even recognize. And when we messed up in the restroom the next morning—" "Don't," I snapped. "Don't say it out loud." He shut his mouth immediately. There was a long, suffocating silence. Then he whispered, "I ruined everything. I ruined you. And I can't live with myself knowing that." I finally found my voice. "Why didn't you stop? Why didn't you think of me?" His face collapsed. "I don't have an answer that makes sense. I wasn't thinking. I was selfish. I was stupid. I was weak. I regretted every second of every day." He reached out as if to touch my hand, then froze when I flinched. "I know I don't deserve it," he whispered, "but is there any part of you, any tiny part, that wants to try again? To see if we can fix this?" My heart clenched. He looked desperate, broken, human. But he was also the man who had kissed my maid of honor in a restroom minutes before our vows. "There's no trust left," I said quietly, "and without trust, there's no relationship." His shoulders sagged, like I'd cut the last string holding him together. I didn't cry. Not then. I'd cried too much already. He cried instead. When he finally nodded, defeated, he reached into his jacket and slid a signed set of divorce papers across the table. "It's final," he said softly. "You don't have to see me again." He stood up, gave me one last devastated look, and walked out. I didn't watch him go. I let the papers sit in front of me until my vision blurred. Then I tucked them into my bag, stood up, and walked back into a world where I wasn't a wife or a bride anymore. Just me. Just Natalie. And somehow, that had to be enough. Weeks passed. Life didn't snap back into place. It crawled forward. Mom stayed with me, helping restore my house room by room. Fresh sheets, new paint, rearranged furniture. She cleaned out every reminder of Mark and Chloe, even the mug he used every morning. Dad checked in daily, sometimes just to ask if I'd eaten. Slowly, painfully, I rebuilt something resembling a routine. I poured myself into fitness, pushing through the ache until the treadmill burned away the numbness. I cut back on drinking. I started cooking again, picking salads and soups over takeout. Healing wasn't glamorous. It wasn't cinematic. It was exhausting. But one day I woke up and didn't cry, and I took that as a victory. Then, out of nowhere, a college friend, Evan, ran into me at a grocery store. He hesitated before speaking. "Nat, I heard about the wedding. I'm so sorry." I nodded stiffly. Small talk felt strange now, like I was learning a forgotten language. But then he said something that made my stomach knot. Some of the groomsmen knew, about Mark and Chloe. I stared at him, horrified. "What do you mean, knew?" He rubbed his neck awkwardly. "They saw them disappearing together that night. They didn't know how far it went, but after you left the reception, they put the pieces together. They felt awful for not saying anything." He hesitated. "And there's more." My heart dropped. "Your ex-best friend, the maid of honor, she's engaged. Or she was." "What happened?" I whispered. "She cheated on her fiancé. He dumped her. Wedding canceled." Something cold washed over me. "It's like karma," Evan muttered. "Poetic in a way." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel satisfaction. Mostly, I felt tired. Tired of lies. Tired of betrayal. Tired of pain. "Karma doesn't make my wedding less ruined," I said quietly. "No," Evan agreed softly. "But it means the story didn't end with you losing. A few months later, I started noticing someone new at work. Daniel, 34, gentle, steady, with an unhurried smile. He was a single father to a little girl named Mia. The first time he showed me a picture of her, he lit up like a sunrise. He wasn't flashy or loud or charming like Mark. He was patient. He listened. He noticed things, like when I'd had a bad day, or when my hands shook slightly from stress. We didn't jump into anything. Neither of us wanted that. But the first time we grabbed coffee together, I felt something fragile start to thaw inside me. Hope. Real hope. Not fantasy wedding hope. Quiet, grounded hope. A month later, he and Mia came over for dinner with my parents. My mother adored Mia instantly. My dad watched Daniel like he was evaluating a candidate for a job, then nodded approvingly when Daniel insisted on doing the dishes. I caught Mia sitting on my parents' couch, swinging her legs and telling my mom all about her cat, and something in my chest warmed. It wasn't a new fairy tale. It was something gentler, something real. Daniel didn't ask me to forget. He didn't expect me to be healed. He just stayed, steady, present. And somehow, that was enough. I'm not married again, not even engaged. But I'm living again. I laugh. I sleep. I breathe without feeling a knife in my chest. My wedding day was destroyed, but my life wasn't. And somewhere between losing everything and slowly rebuilding, I found a version of myself I didn't know existed. Stronger, quieter, sharper. A woman who walked away from betrayal. A woman who learned to choose herself. A woman who learned that the end of a wedding isn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning.